Hello everyone, I'm here today with an extremely serious video on only the most quantifiable mathematics of Genshin Impact. That's right, today I'm going to give a definitive answer to Genshin's hardest question. Who is best girl? Now I know what some of you guys are thinking. Zoob, where's the min-maxing videos? Where are the damage graphs? How do I beat Atlas floor 12? Shut up, I'm doing God's work right now. Who cares about your elemental damage? I'm researching emotional damage. So, let's get down to business. First off, we need to ask ourselves, how does one define best girl? It's a pretty broad approach, and more often than not can lead to more intense verbal altercations. Just look at any show with multiple candidates for best girl, and then go to the comments and see people screaming about who is best girl. It's never a pretty affair. So then, how am I going to define best girl? And by extension, how on earth am I going to determine who is best girl mathematically? Well, that's the entire premise of this video. See, there's a fundamental problem with the actual definition of best girl, which is the female character I like most, and that problem is the fact that everyone likes different things. Even beyond physical characteristics, people are drawn to different personalities and dispositions. Those who like Noelle are less likely to also like Yoimiya. Therefore, there's no real quantifiable way of saying, this is the perfect waifu, period. There is still, however, a way that we can find an estimate of who can be considered best girl, and that is through the age-old time-tested strategy of democracy. The girl who is most liked, chances are, is the one that the most people agree is likable, which is to say that this mystery girl is the most palatable to people's tastes, and the one who satisfies the most can be, in some sense, considered best. So how are we going to go about figuring this out mathematically? It's not like I can make a poll and ask everyone who's their favorite girl. I wouldn't get an accurate sample size first off, and polls are often manipulated heavily by external factors like bots or trolls. However, I can get about 3 approximations, and of these 3 approximations, 2 metrics will be the ones we'll use to determine who is best girl, at least theoretically. The first approximation is probably the weakest approximation, and it's based upon sales numbers. Every time a banner is released, people will roll on those banners and money will be spent in large amounts. Using data given to us by MiHoYo and extrapolated by avid fans, we can approximate who's the most desirable character by seeing which banner had the most money poured into it. This comes with some problems though, mainly that it doesn't take into account 4 stars. Most people aren't rolling on the 5-star banner for the 4-star characters. Some people will, but the mass majority are after the 5 stars. There's also the issue of split banners where 2 5-stars are on at the same time, which can skew the data. And of course, there's the fact that not every 5-star has been run for the same amount of time. Finally, there's the issue of people like me who roll on banners for min-max purposes. The sales history has absolutely no way of displaying the number of players who rolled for a character based on their combative capabilities versus just liking the character for their aesthetics. So what about the second and third metrics? For the second metric, we have to venture into one of the many cesspools of the internet, Reddit. Now, why am I using Reddit? For the very same reason people avoid Reddit. The most fanatical of enthusiasts can be found here, and it's here where the truest sample of people who believe in best girl will reside. Simply speaking, I'm going to be looking at the subscriber counts of the various mains subreddits, and the one that has the most subscribers would very clearly be the most popular character. However, this comes with the same problem as the first metric, in that it doesn't account for people who are there to see how well the character performs combatively. So to counter this, I'm going to look at the top non-meta posts for the week of each subreddit and calculate the total upvotes received by that post, as well as the average number of upvotes for the top 5 non-meta posts. Non-meta in the sense that it has to be a post that doesn't have anything to do with gameplay, and I'm going to do top 5 non-meta posts to see if the top post is actually just an outlier, and so that I don't lose my sanity trying to calculate the average of approximately 200 posts for the larger subreddits. The third metric will use some different sites, but let's focus on the first 2 for now. Getting started, let's start by preemptively removing possible candidates for best girl. So, any character that uses the child body type is going to be automatically rejected. That means no Klee, no Diana, no Chi-Chi, and no Sayu. In case you don't know or didn't notice, Genshin has only 3 main body types for both male and female characters, and they're roughly sorted by age, and it's adult, teen, and child body sizes. Unsurprisingly, saying a literal child is best girl is going to be weird, if not downright asking for a visit from the FBI. Second, I'm not going to be considering any unreleased characters. This is because, like I said earlier, personality does play a lot on the best girl status, and it's hard to tell what personality a character will have before they get any real screen time. Third, no NPCs will be considered, so no Yinger, no Catherine, none of that. Though I don't think any of them would even enter the ranking solely due to how little screen time they get and how little characterization they get. But with that, we've clarified some exceptions to our metrics, so let's get started. Starting with the first metric, just to show you why this data is unreliable, we're already off to a bit of a rocky start. Unfortunately, we only have iOS revenue data from China. However, as an engineer, if there's one thing I've learned is that we make assumptions as often as possible to simplify problems within reasonable bounds. So let's start by assuming that the China market and the US market are directly proportional. That's not too big of an ask. Let us then further assume that the iOS market is directly proportional to the total market. Again, it's not too big of an ask. But even with these assumptions, the data still isn't quite useful. There's a lot of reruns and dual banners, many of which don't have any information on the split of banner summons. So we're going to have to make one more assumption that should help us clarify the data. Assuming that we're only looking for people who would vouch for the characters being best girl, we can actually ignore all reruns. And as an added bonus, we can ignore all dual banners, because those who roll on the first banner are more likely to be the people rolling for aesthetics rather than the gameplay potential. I will admit, of course, that this is a very simplified look at the data, as many gameplay-oriented players will also roll on that first banner because of leaks. And that's not even counting the growing player base, which will cause newer banners to have a higher number of rolls. And if we look at that first banner data, we see that Raiden Shogun just has this enormous lead on literally every other character, not just the other female characters. As such, this is why this metric is mostly useless. Now onto the second metric. I'm not going to bother reading them out loud because as you can see, there's a ton. And yes, I tabulated all of this in an Excel spreadsheet because I'm insane. All values were taken within an hour or two of each other, so they're roughly all snapshotted around the same time period. But as you can see, if we go by just straight number of subscribers, Hu Tao is actually considered to be best girl, with Raiden and Kutzing following close behind. But of course, Hu Tao is one of the strongest units in the entire game, hands down, so it's not unrealistic for her to have a dedicated subreddit with so many followers. Now, if we go by the number of upvotes on the top non-meta post, surprise surprise, Hu Tao is still on top, with Raiden in second, but this time Ganyu has usurped Kutzing's position for third. Now, this is a decent statistic, but it still doesn't really tell us much, because chances are, if you're on a subreddit for the builds or guides of a character, and you see a decent fan art or cosplay or whatever, you might just give it an upvote because it's decent work. So, therefore, this metric is a bit iffy still. If we go by average upvotes for the top 5 non-meta posts, the rankings don't really change all that much at the top, so I'm not going to go over that. Now, while I was doing the tabulation of data, I did come to the realization that a lot of this doesn't really tell us how popular each character was, in terms of aesthetics anyways. So I went back through each subreddit and counted up the number of fan arts, cosplays, and original memes that held a clear and obvious bias for that character without referring to gameplay in the top 10 posts of the week. With that, Raiden actually takes the top spot with 10 out of 10 posts being some sort of fan art or whatever about her as a character. Hu Tao, Kutzing, and Ayaka all tie for second place using this metric. But this still isn't a really accurate measurement. After all, top 10 posts will change on a weekly, if not daily basis. One week might just have a huge deluge of fan art, while another might just end up being a dead time. And at the same time, Raiden was just on banner, so it's even more unfair for characters who haven't really been run in a while. So then, how on earth can we see who is the most popular based on aesthetic alone? And this is where we get into the third metric. There is one place that we can look to see people practically worship a character for nothing but aesthetics, though this is probably the worst place to be looking, in a sense. On the other hand, it does give a very, very definitive look at people who are legitimately in it for nothing but aesthetic. And that, my viewers, is pornography. The fun thing is I'm not monetized, so this means nothing to me, but let's try to keep things civil, shall we? I'm a math-based channel, so we're not going to get too saucy here. Now, the reason that using pornography works here as a metric is that only the most die-hard of fans for this particular character are going to either make pornography or commission someone to make said pornography. These are people who are either engaging a delusion or at worst, living a delusion. You know the kind of people, I won't go into detail. Initially, I wanted to use the various NSFW subreddits that exist, but the problem with that is that most people don't actually use those character-specific subreddits so much that they just use aggregate versions. Genshin Impact as a whole has one singular NSFW subreddit, and that's where most of the degenerates gather. So we're going to have to use a different source, and that is rule34.xxx. The reason this works is that they have a tag system so we can accurately count up the number of degenerate posts for each character, at least in theory. At the same time, from what I understand, I could be completely wrong, but I believe Rule 34.xxx acts kind of like an aggregator. Pornography just tends to end up there via re-uploads or shares or whatever or however it works. Now, I am working on this based on manga aggregator sites like MangaDex, which just kind of take manga from other sites and compiles them onto their own servers. At the time of writing this script, I haven't actually checked Rule 34.xxx yet, and I'm not really looking forward to doing so. So wish me luck, I'm going in. Hopefully the FBI doesn't come knocking. Alright, that took me about 20 minutes. Luckily, you can actually use the main page and see the number of arts per tag without having to actually see said art, so my eyes were spared for the most part. And using this new, dirtier metric, best girl actually turns out to be Mona, followed by Ganyu, then Raiden. Honestly surprised about that, given that Mona is a pretty lackluster character. But even now, with such an extreme measure, I can tell you that it's still lacking in actual substance because of one thing. Remember how I said that these people are degenerates? Well, without going into too much detail, a lot of hentai, which is what this kind of pornography is, relies on kinks. And if you know the various kinks associated with Mona or Ganyu, it's very obvious why they're on top of this list. Characters like Yanfei or Sucrose, who are near the bottom of this list, don't get as many pornographic arts made because they don't necessarily hit the criteria as characters needed to have such things made about them. So unfortunately, this metric is also fundamentally flawed. In the end, we're looking at about 4-ish metrics used to determine who exactly is best girl, and I think at this point, looking at all the data and weighing them accordingly, I can say with near 100% certainty that best girl is, without a doubt, Ganyu. Why? Because I said so. Ganyu is best girl and I will die on this hill. Okay, but seriously, this was an impossible task. Each metric we used always ends up with some problem or other. But the real problem here isn't the metric we're using, necessarily speaking. It's a crowdsourced opinion with pretty much no tyranny of the majority here. You don't have characters or players going from one subreddit to another subreddit and asking them to join forces to boost their numbers or anything. There's none of that. Instead, the flaw truly lies in the original question: how do you determine best girl? And the real answer is, you can't. Nobody can. There's no way to really see who is the most popular character here. Every possible metric that I can think of is bound to have some sort of disturbance that will throw off the true number, and there's very often not a way to extricate that true number out from all the disturbances. Now, I could have made a video regarding body proportions, gone into the psychology of creating a sustainable and stable relationship, etc., but the thing is, not everyone cares about all that stuff. Some people just want someone they could have been able to hug, or a shoulder to cry on. At least hypothetically, because I'm gonna be really honest, that sounds pathetic as hell. I'm so sorry. Please touch grass. Ultimately, who best girl is depends on the person, and it's not something that they're likely going to be able to convince anyone else about unless they're also fans of that character. I just made this video because I thought it'd be hilarious for April 1st after being gone for like half a year, and also because part of me was actually interested in seeing who was the most popular female character. Now you know, there's no real answer, just a lot of vague pseudo-answers within strict confines that only apply within those boundaries. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you liked this video or otherwise learned something from it. I don't know, this was kind of mostly a joke video. So, yeah, new actual video coming out later at some point. I don't know when, but it's in the works, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye!